Hello everyone, and welcome to my anime style waterfall tutorial. If you watched my previous video before, then you might have wondered how did I make this? Well, it's very easy, and in this video, I will guide you through the step-by-step process of how it is done. Before we start, this tutorial will be separated into 3 different parts and 1 extra bonus part. The first part will be the ocean tutorial, where I will be covering how we can make this anime style ocean in our scene. The second part will consist of how we can make this anime style waterfall shader, where we will also be animating this using drivers. The third and the final part will entirely be filled with anime style VFX, where we will go over how we can achieve these different types of effects found in this tutorial. The bonus part is optional, where we will do the compositing in Blender and enhance this scene better. I will provide the download links below, and if you like, you can join the Discord server if you have any other questions regarding the tutorial. So the effects are really simple. First, let's actually add random rocks in our ocean. So we can actually just pick one of these rocks here, Shift D to duplicate, then Shift Z to move it across the Z axis plane. Then move this wherever you want. So let's go back to the camera and then position our rock the way we want this to be. We can even rotate it. Let's duplicate this rock once again. Rotate towards the Z axis and then scale it up. We can then get one of the rock and then just duplicate this. Just like before, we can scale this down and make small pebbles around the rock like that. Then we can do the same thing for this one as well. Let's then add random rocks on the second layer of the ocean. So let's duplicate. Then just like before, we can rotate this however we want. Then just put this and randomize the rotation as well and the scale. So we can also add rocks in there. Once you're done adding random rocks into your scene, we can then start with the ripple effect. So the ripple effect is very simple. First, let's bring the cursor down here, and let's add a plane by holding Shift A, Mesh, then Plane. Let's move this up so we don't have any lag when we're working on the ripple effect. And then let's click New. Let's delete the BSDF here, and let's add a texture coordinate. Set this to object. Then what we can do next is we will actually add a vector matte. So let's add a vector matte node. Turn this into length. Now you will see that we have this circular motion here. What we can do here next is we can actually go ahead and add a noise texture. Now if we put the value in the vector, you will see that we have this circular noise. To keep this simple, we will manipulate the noise texture by using a mix color node so that it is not totally circular. So what we will do here is we will actually add a mix color node. So we will mix between the circular motion of the length and the texture coordinates object socket. Now, as you can see that we are getting this result here. And now if we connect the result to the vector and check the factor, you can see that we are starting to see some results here. And if we add a color ramp, so we can see the results much clearer, we can set this to constant. Then I'll slowly drag this down. And then I will go ahead and mess with the factor. You can see that we are starting to see some vortex here, like a whirlpool. So what we will do here is we will go ahead and actually duplicate these 2 more times. And we will go ahead and put the factor to 0.6 with a slightly low color ramp here. Then let's check this here. We will do 0.7 or 0.8 with a slightly lower factor like so. Then over here we will do 0.9, which is slightly close And then we can slightly add more detail there. As you can see that we have this overlay here. Now what we can do here is, in between these, we can actually go ahead and add a mapping node in between the mix color and the texture coordinate. We can do the same for this one as well. And then we can add a driver by moving the Z location there. So what we're gonna do here is, we're actually gonna go ahead and turn this into 4D. And do the same for this one as well. And let's actually decrease this by a little bit. And let's mess with the W socket here. Same thing for this. And this one as well. Then what we're gonna do here is, we're actually gonna duplicate this texture coordinate in this length node. And this will act as our mask. Let's add an invert node. Let's add a map range, and then turn this from linear into smoother step. What we can do here is, we can actually transparent this. So by going here in the shader tab, let's go to the blend mode, turn this into alpha blend with none for the shadow, and let's go ahead and add a mix color or mix shader, transparent node, and an emission node. Make sure the transparent node goes to the top and the emission goes to the bottom. And see if this works well, which it should work. Just like so. Then, if we go ahead and get a mix color node, turn this from mix to add, we can actually see here that if we connect the color ramp to the socket A of this third layer, then we connect the second color ramp to the socket B, we can then mess with the factor here. Then we can connect this to the mix shader factor. Then you can see that we have this very cool effect right there. Duplicate this once again. Make sure the result of the first mix color goes to the socket A, and get the top layer over here to the socket B, and then connect this second result to the factor. Of course, you can always mess around with the factor and the color ramp. Once you're done, we can actually go ahead and duplicate this mix color and turn this into multiply. We can then connect this group of nodes, this map range result, to the socket B of the multiply, and turn the factor up to 1. You can mess around with the from minimum here, -0.4 or -0.5, completely up to you. Then you can now basically go ahead and add a driver to all of these. So basically what we want to do here is, let's add a math node and turn this into multiply. Let's then add a value node. Connect the value node there. And let's give this a driver. Tag frame divided by, we can do 1,000. Let's then get a combine XYZ. Connect the vector to the location of all mapping node. Connect that there. location, then there, and connect this multiply to the socket Z over here. If we play the animation and increase the value of this multiply node by, let's say, multiplied by 10, you can see that we have this cool animation here that we can change the speed. We can do 100 for faster speed. We can also do negative 1000. So the vortex is going outwards. Let's set this back to 10. We can also do 20. Or 15. Then once you're done, we can actually move this down. Until it touches the ocean. You can then go ahead and put this on where the rocks are. Let's put back the from minimum to 0. Let's add a value node that controls the scale of all 3 noise textures. Scale. And in here, we can control the scale. So let's do 7.5. Let's actually turn this back into linear. And then we can go ahead and add these on wherever our rocks are. We can then go ahead and put this over here, just like that. And then on the rocks over here. So let's go ahead and duplicate this and then move this here. There you go. So this is one part of the effects of the ripple shader for our waterfall scene. Next, the last thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and add some type of water ripple effect coming from the waterfall. So we're also going to do that as well. So the effects are very easy. First, let's go ahead and get a UV sphere. Then, let's go ahead and move this down on the waterfall. Let's scale this down. And then let's go ahead and scale this until we fill up the side gaps. So, for me, it is SY. So I will go ahead and scale this in the Y-axis. Just like so. And then what I will do here is I will actually add a modifier. So let's go to the modifier tab here. Let's click add modifier and click search, and let's go ahead and find this place. Now let's click this new button here, and let's go ahead and click this texture down here, and let's select clouds. Let's shade smooth this and click tab, click A to select all, then subdivide. Let's go ahead and turn this size down, or find the right size. Let's go back to the modifier, and you can select the direction to Z, so it will only be in the Z axis. Then we can control here the size. Let's go back to the modifier tab and let's add a empty. We can do cube, and this cube will be the controller for our animated effects here. And let's go ahead, click the coordinates and click object, and we can click this eyedropper tool and then click the empty here. And then once we move this empty, as you can see, everything gets animated. So what we will do here is, let's go to the object here, this object properties, and in this Z axis here, let's add a driver, tag frame divided by 10, so it will keep going and going without stopping, as you can see there. And then what we can do here next is we can actually go ahead and select this sphere again, and let's put this up so we can work on the shader. Let's now delete this ocean here, and let's get the material tab, and let's get the shader editor, and we can now start working with the shader. So let's click new here, and let's get a RGB and delete this BSDF. Let's then select and copy the same color of the ocean, just like so, and let's make this a little brighter with a slightly lower saturation. Now what we can do here is we can actually go ahead and add a mix color node, and let's add a ambient occlusion, and let's add a color ramp, and then we can connect them together. We will connect the color to the socket B, connect that, and turn this mix color into multiply so we can add the ambient occlusion in our object. Let's go back to the modifiers tab, and let's add a subdivision surface. Make sure it's only one. Then let's turn this multiply up, and then we can control the multiply here. Let's then go ahead and add a reflection type here. So let's go ahead and duplicate this multiply and turn this into add. Let's then add a layer weight node. Then let's add a color ramp. We can connect the facing to the factor and the color to the socket B. We can manipulate the layer weight into however we want. So we can turn this from linear into constant, and then slightly put this down, and we can control the factor. We can then go ahead and add another mix color, and we can duplicate this color ramp, connect the facing to the factor, and connect the color to the socket B once again, but this time we will lower down the intensity of this layer weight. What we can do here next is we can actually go ahead and add this again, and let's get a glossy BSDF. Then get a color ramp so we can then connect these all together. Turn this from linear into constant. So now we will have this type of reflection. Let's connect this here and put the factor up to 1, and then play around with these settings. Here. We can then go ahead and get a noise texture to add some type of texture in our ocean effects here. So let's duplicate this multiply and turn this into add, connect the factor to the socket P, and let's go ahead and get a color ramp to control the noise texture. Let's turn this from 3D into 4D. Let's get a control T, then let's turn this from generated into object and add a driver to the W socket by adding tag frame divided by, we can do 10. Let's then lower down the scale to 1. And then play around with the noise texture. We can do 5, it's slightly faster. We can add detail and slightly roughness and a little bit of distortion, just like so. Now what we can do here is we can actually add a hue saturation value to control the saturation and the value and the brightness of this effect. We can now then go ahead and, just like before, what we did in the ocean, let's go ahead and put this down, click and hold this material, and drag this to the effects here. Let's then edit the ambient occlusion over here by turning the factor down. Let's set the color ramp from linear to constant. That way we can control it with only one slider. Put this down. There you go. Let's then add this to the second waterfall. And then now we have this cool looking effect in our waterfall. Let's go ahead and slightly increase the saturation of this. And then we're fully done. We can then go ahead and change the strength of this place here. So let's go ahead and go back to the modifiers tab and click the displace, and we can increase the strength and find the ideal strength that we want. And what we can do next is we can copy this strength, and then we can paste this here, and then just like before, we can always move this up here, and there you go, just like that. Let's then go ahead and do one last shader. Move this away. And let's go ahead and duplicate this color ramp. Connect the facing to the factor. And duplicate this once again. And then just connect it like that. But this time, let's put the factor all the way to 1. There you go. Now we're done with the waterfall effects. Now, we're gonna add a particle system, so we can make this a little bit more realistic. So let's go ahead and add a plane. Let's make this wide. And let's then go ahead and rotate this 45-degree angle. So R, Y, 45. We can then go ahead and go to the shader editor, click new, and let's turn off the shadows. Then next, let's add a particle system. So let's go to the particles. We can basically go ahead and go to the velocity and increase the velocity, just like so. Let's turn the lifetime all the way up to 1000. And the same thing should happen here. Let's then go to the field weights. And when you mess with the gravity, this will control if the gravity is strong or not. Forgot that. Anyway, let's get the number up to 10,000 or 5,000. Let's get the gravity all the way up to 1. Let's edit this, the rotation. What we can do here is select this particle emitter. Let's go to the render tab and render as object, and then select the sphere. Then what we're gonna do next is let's get the scale randomness up to 1. And then let's select this sphere. And what we're gonna do here is we're just going to go ahead and delete this BSDF, but we're gonna instead replace it with the RGB and color it white. You can actually add an emission shader here that controls the bloom. Now, what's gonna happen here is this is too big. So what we're gonna do here is we're actually going to go ahead and make this small by turning the scale slightly smaller. But in return, we're going to go ahead and increase the number to 10,000. And by playing around with the scale and the number, we're going to get a very good results. One, two, three. Let's go ahead and click this spear again. Lower down the emission. Just one. And let's see here if we can do it in 20,000. We can now go ahead and delete this here. And let's select this emitter again and duplicate this all the way over here on the second waterfall, and basically do the same thing. But this time we're gonna make this smaller, slightly smaller. And see how this reacts. Now what we're gonna do here is we're actually gonna go ahead and go to the particles emitter tab here. Go to the render and the viewport display and toggle the show emitter. Let's set the lifetime 50 frames. Once you're done, let's go ahead and move to the very last section of the effects. This will greatly enhance the entire visuals of your scene. So let's go ahead and let's get started. First, Shift A and add a UV spear. Scale this down, all the way down, until it is flat. Shade smooth. And let's go ahead and shade this. Let's get the shader editor. Click new. Delete this. And let's add a noise texture. Ctrl T. And let's go ahead and add a color ramp. And put this in constant. Let's go ahead and add a driver for the Z axis of the location. So tag frame divided by 100. 25. And as you can see, there's one thing that you realize is that everything comes from the inside all the way to the outside. If you do this with a simple plane or a simple circle, I don't believe it works, but in spear and scale down, this will work. Let's go ahead and set this to object. And let's mess with the roughness. And then add some scale. Maybe you can do 6. You can also do 4. Up to you. And we can also scale this to the y-axis to make this wide. We can then make this transparent by turning the shadow mode to none and alpha blend the blend mode. And then what we can do here is you can actually go ahead and add a gradient texture. Ctrl T, object, let's get the color ramp. Let's do quadratic spear and let's do -1. Let's turn off the show back face. Let's turn this into is and then mess with the entire thing here. So 6.25, you can do that. So let's add a mix color and then multiply this factor to 1. Let's add the hue saturation value and then an emission shader, transparent shader, and then a mix shader. The factor, emission down there, and the transparent PSTF to the second socket. The emission controls the brightness. You can actually go ahead and color this if you want. see here, the roughness controls that. So what we can actually do here is we can actually select this sphere, duplicate, and put this down. And apply it just like so. You can mess with the emission here if you want some details. One, then mess with the noise texture and the color ramp here, and let's go ahead and also add this on the second waterfall as well. And once you're done, let's actually make this better by adding distortion to the effects here, as you can see there. And what we can actually do here is we can actually copy one of these, Ctrl+C, and then we can actually just put this there. Let's actually duplicate this material here and make this fast. There you go. And then just copy and paste this effects all the way down there on the second waterfall. Let's actually use alpha hashed. Try getting this material here. Slightly put this away and then organize it. And then basically we're done. This is the entire tutorial for the anime style waterfall. So half of the tutorial of what I just did here is actually just copy and pasting of what was previously made and just modifying it, as you can see here on the effects waterfall. And that's basically it. It's just consisting many layers of effects to fully create this entire thing.